Young female colleagues are traded like cattle and moved onto different units depending on which male officers found them attractive. One officer was beaten and raped multiple times by a fellow officer. She was so distraught by the handling of her case, she tried to take her own life. A gay officer was targeted with false rumours he took drugs and was involved in sexual relationships with senior officers. He said he doesn't trust the Met and varies his route home to avoid other police officers. A Muslim officer says he had bacon placed inside his boots and was worried about reprisals if he reported it. A Sikh officer had his beard cut off. The behaviour was written off as pranks and banter. And one officer said rape and sexual assault detection is so low that you may as well say it's legal in London. One officer says young female colleagues are traded like cattle and moved onto different units depending on which male officers found them attractive. One officer was beaten and raped multiple times by a fellow officer. She was so distraught.
She was assaulted by a stranger.
So today we're going to be looking at the Casey review and the findings and most importantly the recommendations.
Pandemonium outside the Stephen Lawrence inquiry as the 5 suspects are escorted out of the building. They were attacked with hot coffee being thrown over at least one of them. Others were punched by the huge crowd of demonstrators waiting around the Elephant and Castle.
This is exactly what the police have spent all day trying to avoid, public disorder scenes which could turn into violence.
The police had been hoping to avoid a repeat of Monday's violence when CS spray was used on demonstrators. But tensions outside the inquiry were running too high and the crowd turned on the police. Much of the frustration during the inquiry has been directed at police inaction at the time of Stephen's murder in 1993. More than 100 officers, many wearing riot equipment, were called in. Traffic was brought to a standstill for over an hour as protesters spilled onto the road.
I think that the people have felt frustrated by the evasiveness of the prime suspects in this case, evading the inquiry questions, failing to get out the truth, and I think that has left people in a very annoyed and very angry state.
For the second day, the 5 suspects had been answering questions at the inquiry. No one has ever been convicted over the death of Stephen, an A-level student who was stabbed at a bus stop in Eltham. David Norris, brothers Neil and Jamie Accourt, Luke Knight and Gary Dobson have all at various times been charged with his murder.
On the stand, David Norris repeatedly gave short, clipped answers to every question put to him. Michael Mansfield, QC for the Lawrences, asked, "Has there been a decision by you and the 4 others that you're just going to say, 'I can't remember' to every question?" "I'd help if I could," said Norris. Judge William McPherson interjected and said, "Mr. Norris, are you going to persist in saying 'I don't remember'? If you do, the inference I and the members of the public will draw is for us."
Later, the 5 issued a statement saying they sympathised with the family and denied murdering Stephen. However, that's no comfort for supporters of Stephen Lawrence. They feel the 5 have got away without being asked any hard-hitting questions. Guy Lynn, Channel 1, The Elephant and Castle.
My son's been murdered and none of these officers, the justice system, the politicians, nobody cared. These idiots who have murdered my son had more rights than we did. People seem to think I may have moved on and I've got over Stephen's death. I haven't.
122 or 161?
122, man.
How long?
If we'd known that the bus was going to take so long, the 122 to come, we would have just jogged it. If straight ahead of me is 12 o'clock where Stephen's standing, then at 10 o'clock I remember this group of white boys on the other side of the road shouting,
She ran!
and I just saw this guy strike a downward blow, which I thought was a weapon.
Come on, Steve! Come on, just keep running!
He wasn't running properly, he was running lopsided, and he kept saying to me, Dwayne, like, what's happened to me, what's happened to me?
Just keep running with me, Brad! Come on with me! No, Steve, man! Come on, I beg you, get up!
On the Saturday morning when I got in, I was made aware that there were phone calls coming in, naming people, but not saying how they knew. Many of the calls were of a similar nature, as if a rumour is going round and people are phoning in the rumour they've heard. Obviously, information isn't evidence. There is a distinct difference. The strategy was not to arrest. There were juveniles. You had to handle juveniles very carefully, obviously. To get them in, to simply release them, wasn't really making a lot of sense.
We're supposed to have our trust in them, and we think they're doing a wonderful job. But that's just a joke, because I don't believe they're doing a wonderful job.
Them times I was really angry, because all the stories that you've heard of what happened to young black men, and then you begin to think about, had he been white?
They would have surrounded the black community. They would have arrested as many black boys as they could, and they would not stop until they get the killer.
We brought over Nelson Mandela to energise the white community. The contrast between the failure of British domestic politicians and the willingness of Nelson Mandela to become involved, I think, tells its own story.
Your tragedy is our tragedy.
Getting Mandela on board changed it from a local story to a national story. More importantly, the next day were the arrests.
I honestly don't believe there was any linkage between Nelson Mandela or anything he said and the timing of the arrests.
2 teenagers accused of murdering the black schoolboy Stephen Lawrence have been released from custody after the Crown Prosecution Service ruled there was insufficient evidence against them.
I was so angry, so angry. The killers were still out on the street. My son had a future, and they've taken that away. And I just feel as if they were laughing at us. There's nobody, I think, who looked to pacify me. Nobody could tell me no. I presume they could, but I wouldn't accept it.
We need policing, which is a service and not a force. Quite frankly, this report is a horror. It's disappointing because it just articulates exactly what's been going on for decades in this country in the form of policing and the way that systemic racism is relentless and just so harmful to the health and well-being of racialized communities, women, black women, and people who are diverse in terms of sexuality, disability, race, and gender. From the cradle to the grave, we're not safe. And for me, whilst it describes, again, what's been described from the Scarman report, what's been described from the Macpherson report, the lessons have not been learned. We love that line, the lessons, that we're going to learn the lessons. Clearly, we don't know how to learn the lessons. So we need to disrupt how we are doing things significantly in order for trust and confidence to actually be built with, for me in particular, the black communities. I am one of the directors of Black Thrive Global, and we've been commissioned by MOPAC to lead on a consultation across London with black communities and allies about how do we hold the police accountable and scrutinize them. In every conversation that we've had, the mistrust is in every atom of every black body in this city. We are traumatized by the harm that is being conducted rampantly and relentlessly by policing, which is so unaccountable. It's like the wild, wild west out there. You can do anything you like and it's okay. Well, it's not okay. And the recommendations and the solutions we support, but actually the recommendations and the solutions that are being proffered from the black community through the consultation are the ones which we need to pay serious attention to, because that is the voice of the people who will give a saying that in order for you to police by consent, these are our demands. We do not feel safe with you. So in order for the level of transformation to take place, with the magnitude of the challenge at hand that we face, significant collaborative, different way of operating needs to change, and it needs to start from today. As my colleagues have said, we can't have another week, not another month, not another year, not another 5, not another 10 years of this disgrace. We are in disgraceful times here in this moment. And for me, I'm committed to work with my colleagues, with my communities to make this different. It cannot go on. It is not sustainable. It is not a good look. Indeed, for London, it is not a good look. For the nation, it is not a good look internationally. We need to sort this out.
Today is a sad day. Because if anyone had told me 25 years ago, when I gave evidence at the McPherson inquiry as a member of the Black Police Association, we would be back here talking about the same systemic failures. Similarity between the McPherson report and the Casey report, that someone died. Blood was shed. And that's why I want to acknowledge Stephen Lawrence. His death did have a change. It caused the McPherson report and the recommendations to be fully implemented with the backing of the Home Secretary and subsequent Labour Home Secretaries with independent oversight. And here we are 25 years later, and we've had another death. And I acknowledge the passing of Sarah Everard, because it's because of this death that we are now outside. But of course, there's been many deaths in the black community, many deaths in the gay community, and of course, many deaths that cannot be defended, but the Met defends. They've got this defensible nature, and I know I was there for 30 years, and I tried to challenge that through the BPA, not only through McPherson, but throughout. And here I am, 10 years after retirement, and still challenging it. And it's a disgrace. I was saddened to see how Mark Rowley was trying to be defensive against clear data that Louise Casey has put forward. And so that's a very, very challenging start. At least Sir Paul Condon, when he was commissioner, he accepted it. But we don't have that now. And that's why, as a collaboration, we are here to make changes, to speak truth to power, and not to accept the status quo, and to think that this report can be just shelved. McPherson was ultimately shelved, and why? Because this government has got a totally different emphasis on how to control the commissioner, his management board, and the rest of the organisation. If you don't have political will, you won't get the changes you need. So this is why it has to be people power coming together, people who stand up for equality, fairness and justice. That's why I'm not chilling on a beach somewhere in Africa or Asia or somewhere in retirement mode. I am still an activist and an advocate for change, because it cannot carry on like this. And in closing, let me say, I don't want my grandchildren to go through the same injustices as my children's generation, my generation, my parents' generation. Enough is enough, and it's got to stop. Thank you.
What has changed since the McPherson report after the death of Stephen Lawrence. Because we've had over the past year, and more so the past 6 months, where we've been seeing the bad behaviour of a few bad apples within the Metropolitan Police Station, or service, not even station, the Metropolitan Police Service, where you've got a few individuals and their friends, whether it's within WhatsApp group or a boys or girls club, behaving badly and thinking that it is something good to do, or more importantly, they're above the law. And if we look at the face of justice, it's got a blindfold on there for a reason, where it sees no one. So justice is blinded to whoever you are. So the wrath of the law should also be used on these officers, if not more so, because they took an oath to uphold the law, and instead they joined the police force and then decided that they were going to break the law. So although we spoke in our last episode about scrapping IPP, I think the IPP should be transferred to police officers that have not only disgraced themselves and their family, but also disgraced their colleagues and the force and the country. For far too long, we have seen things being covered up. And a lot of the time, unless you've been through something yourself, you wouldn't understand the trauma that is left with you. It's like we speak to some young people that have been stop and search in the street, and if the stop and search hasn't gone the right way and done professionally, that young person's left traumatized for life. There's a lot of men that are in their 50s, 60s and still become frightened when a police car drives next to them or the police pulls them over because of how historically they've seen the police or thought the police behave. And the sad thing, when you look at that, there's thousands of officers. And just like when we see young people stabbing and murdering each other on the street, one young person, because it's 1% of young people in gangs and criminal activity, and similarly to the police, 1% of police behave badly. But it only takes one individual to ruin the good standing of an organisation or a community.
David Carrick, multiple rapist, had 9 non-crime incidents between 2000 and 2019, 5 public complaints, including the one where he dragged a woman down a staircase by her throat. He got through his initial vetting in 2001. He passed his probation in 2003, despite the fact that they knew if they bothered to look, which is what Jessica did behind us on all of these cases. He passed his probation in 2003. God alone knows how. He had checks done to become a firearms officer in 2009, so we knew about the DV. Nobody checked, and this is what's so staggering about this organisation. And then he was re-vetted in 2016, that was delayed by 5 years. And people are saying I'm being tough on the cops.
I mean, it's wonderful to see such extraordinary energy and perception over this thing. This is a genuine question. I look around here and we've got loads of cops in Parliament and so on, and if I was them being told that they were somehow institutionally racist, I think I'd be quite upset. I mean, I can't speak to the procedures and protocols that you referred to, but in terms of the men and women in the Metropolitan Police Service, why do you say it's institutionally racist? Because the vast majority of them are not. So it really is a question. Why do you say that?
I think, dare I say, that I've had it in the last couple of days that people have referred to sort of, you're very powerful, you're very emotional, and don't think for a moment that behind this is a very steely, determined weight of evidence. So I can tell you, without any conjecture, that almost 50% of black police officers in the Metropolitan Police experience racism. That's evidenced. It's not conjecture. It's not anything else. I can tell you all of those statistics. I can tell you, for example, that and you should worry about this as a Home Affairs Select Committee, that in 95% of cases in the Metropolitan Police of police-perpetrated domestic violence, only 95% proceed. So the issues today are very, very grave. And the second thing I wanted to say today, and to answer your actual question, is essentially all we have done is held up a mirror to what the Metropolitan Police Service have told us. So we've been in the Met and with the Met. We have run discussion groups, we have run testimony, we have run surveys, we have looked at their own evidence. If you think about it, 53% of serving police officers don't think people should join the Metropolitan Police Service in London. That's not because I've published a report today. It's not because of what I've talked about today. It's what they think ahead of this report being published. That was done round about last autumn. Remember too that in a service where many people get married, many people pass policing up and down through generations, only 33% would actually suggest that their families should join the Metropolitan Police. So the interesting thing about reviews and reports is that you reflect the reality of the lived experience of people in this organisation. And so it's not that we are putting words into their mouths. And also, can I really come to this issue of institution and the word institutional? Macpherson did not say that, in fact, he almost, I think, gifted the Metropolitan Police at that time, because he said it's not that anybody is individually racist, it is that the organisation is institutionally racist. And that really, in a way, is saying that your procedures and your systems are institutionally racist, rather than suggesting that any officer individually was racist. What I'm saying is actually worse than that. I am saying that we have homophobic, sexist and racist police officers serving in the Metropolitan Police Service, many of whom are regularly in the newspapers at the moment for misconduct complaints. And at the same time, I'm saying that they treat each other very poorly with prejudice, and on top of that, there is institutional, systemic and organisational bias. So I think it's a really easy way, isn't it, to say, God, don't blame the guys and gals, this is just bad apples, they don't represent the thousands. What I'm saying in this report, and remember this is London, where 50% of the population isn't white, that actually it is totally out of kilter with the city that it serves. And within that, it actually doesn't treat people very well who are black. And to be honest, because of the choices they made around public protection, they ripped the heart out of the service they deliver to women and to children. So they know it. The police service know it. Officers know it. What we've had is people saying, finally, somebody's laid this bare. And I think that's the important thing today, is that we have laid bare in the last 48 hours the enormity of this. Police officers know it, and if we want to help good police officers that aren't racist and aren't sexist, let's stop being in denial about it.
Okay. You could have written this report, and it's a very, it's a horrifying report, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I suspect somebody will probably write it in about 10 or 15 years' time, because the underlying thing is that people tell us what's wrong, but nobody ever addresses the solution. Nobody has said, as part of this report, the amount of, let alone the appalling behaviour, the incompetence, the basic incompetence is frightening, and none of those people will get sacked. No, none of those people will be reprimanded. Nothing will happen. All these people who've been incompetent at best, and a lot worse for years, I'm not talking about the people under investigation, I'm talking about the senior police officers who were supposed to look after this organisation. Nothing happens to them.
Well, perhaps we will have the Commissioner in. I mean, I think we'll have the Commissioner in to put those points to him.
I think that's, yeah. I think as a colleague that's Conservative, I think you also have to read the part of the report that says over a decade, £0.7 million was removed from the Metropolitan Police Service. They had to lose money in very significant numbers, and they made those choices. And I think some of those choices weren't right in relation to some. But to blame this entirely on the shoulders of the Metropolitan Police retrospectively would not, in my mind, be fair. And also, let's remember that Stephen Lawrence lost his life 30 years ago. There have been successive there have been successive governments that have not done anything to address the racism in the Metropolitan Police that yet again I have uncovered. But we have also uncovered many other issues that nobody has looked at before. And the key issue is actually what is making you angry, is, and I get it, is a sense of complete denial of their responsibility. They've got to do something about it. I mean, just coming to the point, I mean, this is just so staggering that if you think that David Carrick, multiple rapist, had 9 non-crime incidents between 2000 and 2019, 5 public complaints, including the one where he dragged a woman down a staircase by her throat. He got through his initial vetting in 2001. He passed his probation in 2003, despite the fact that they knew if they'd looked, if they bothered to look, which is what Jessica did behind us on all of these cases. He passed his probation in 2003. God alone knows how. He had checks done to become a firearms officer in 2009, so we knew about the DV. You know, nobody checked, and this is what's so staggering about this organisation. And then he was re-vetted in 2016 that was delayed by 5 years. And people are saying, I'm being tough on the cops. I'm being tough. They treated those women with utter disrespect by not making sure that their systems were able to do what is common sense in another organisation. In any other organisation, that you would put 2 and 2 together. And if one of those women hadn't heard Susan Everard's victim impact statement reported in the news, it was because of her coming forward that that man was stopped. So the stakes are incredibly high, and I suppose that's why I feel quite powerful in how I'm trying to convey to the new commissioner, the deputy commissioner, and every single serving police officer is, are we going to allow this organisation to be incompetent and also in denial about the fact they will rather protect a man like him than they will protect their own women, black people that work there, and the people they're supposed to serve, remember, not be a force for. So, you know, the stakes are incredibly high. I'm incredibly frustrated that we need something that comes back that actually gives us reform here. And you're so powerful. You know, you are the Home Affairs Select Committee. We're not. We're a band of mighty annoying people trying to put the evidence together to persuade you and everybody else to do something about it. I'm slightly worried at the moment that the size of reform required is of the size of sort of RUC into PSNI, but driven by different reasons. And I'm not sure that I'm hearing at the moment, and that could be because I'm concerned that it won't work and that in 20 years from now somebody will be sitting before you saying that Casey review in 2023 laid it bare and nothing changed. That's my, you know, from my old people's home, if we still have them, that, you know, hopefully with lots of sherry, that's what will be happening. And actually the serious side of what I'm trying to say is that they have to accept the reform now, and I'm worried that the size of the reform isn't reflected in what the Home Secretary said yesterday, because it's kind of, you can't just, I'll trust him, let him get on with it, no matter how brilliant that individual is. And that's my worry. And that's where I think Mr. Loughton is right to say, to be fair, good question to me, you know, do you think that, you know, the checks are right? Do you think the balance is right? How soon? I'm conscious of time. I just wanted to say one last thing about the word institutional, Chairman, if I may.
Yes, please do. Yes, please
so,
do.
I've been thinking about this, that Marcus inherited an organisation and possibly, dare I say it, a culture that is sort of long on hubris and quite short on humility. And it is my own view that right now, the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner and the report that we have given allows them to be bigger, to be the bigger ones, to leave their hubris to one side and to sort of say, wouldn't it be good if we honoured Doreen Lawrence's son? Wouldn't it be good that we honoured all the black Londoners whose mums right now are thinking, is my child carrying a knife? Is he going to be stopped and searched? How will he be stopped and searched? You know, people telling their kids as they grow up, don't look at a police officer if you're black. We are wanting to tell our children to run to police officers black families and non-white people haven't said that for some time. And I think, you know, really in honour of that, Mark needs to be bigger than the sort of headline or the word, and needs to remember we all have to be bigger sometimes than that's what being in public life is about. That's the responsibility that we carry as public servants. And I suppose that's why it's for me really about an end to hubris and a beginning of humility. And that's why it's important, and that's why the words are important, Chairman. And that's really any support that you were all able to give in a cross-party way to that would be so enormously grateful.
Well, can I just ask two things very quickly? One thing that occurs to me is this accelerated misconduct hearings that I've been hearing about that other police chief constables have used. The Met don't seem to have used this. Is that correct? They don't seem to have used it in the numbers that other chief constables feel able to use it.
I think there's been fewer accelerated hearings. That's definitely right. They use the legally qualified chair system when they feel they haven't got a kind of slam dunk case and they haven't admitted it. Again, it's very heavily reliant on. It is very, very heavily reliant on regulations, and we think they could probably do better on both parts. We're not saying we haven't said that legally qualified chairs aren't able to to come to a good decision. They're panel decisions, and we certainly think that that's not the root of the problem here. So the answer is not let's have loads and loads of accelerated hearings, but it is for the Met to get their cases together well.
Yes, I think we'd just be very surprised that an officer who's caught masturbating gets a conviction in the courts, is not put through an accelerated misconduct hearing.
He was put at misconduct.
He was put.
He was. And back at Met Culture,
he wasn't dismissed.
He wasn't dismissed. He was given a written warning.
They understand what gross misconduct means?
No, that's what we write in our report, sir, is that we don't think they understand fully what gross misconduct means. I've spent the year thinking about the fact that we were commissioned in the light of Sarah Everard's death. And I think when all of this stuff gets into the media and all of those sorts of things, and people were chasing for headlines and running to get what we'd said out, and Victrim in The Guardian going, oh, exclusives, and I was so irritated by all of that, particularly that, because I felt that we have tried so hard throughout this review to do it in a way which would honour Sarah Everard's memory, her family, Mina Smallman, her daughters, the families of Stephen Port, who killed those 4 young men, and then finally the 13 victims that we know of Carrick, 12 of whom were sentenced, and one for various reasons wasn't. And I suppose I just wanted to say, and I probably won't have another chance to say this, is that the reform needed really is on behalf of them. And, we have a system of consent in this country, that the public decide what our laws are and how they should be changed. You make those changes in Parliament. That's what you do as parliamentarians. You, on our behalf, make those changes. Then we ask the police to hold those changes on your behalf and our behalf. That's gone horribly wrong here. Consent is broken in London. And I feel, sort of in honour of the last 12 months, of the victims of some of these police officers, we owe it to them to get change. And you have the power there, much more than me.
When we look at the Casey review, some of the things that jumped out from there was homophobic, racist, misogynistic, where women were complaining, females, within the Metropolitan Police Force, that they had either been raped or they felt unsafe. And that should never happen. I've seen the Commissioner come out, and I have to commend him, this new Commissioner, Mark Rowley. He's taken a total different stance to this. He's even said zero tolerance, and he's going to weed out all the bad characters within the Met. And I have to say, it's a breath of fresh air to have a commissioner that is zero tolerance on any of this, because when we're seeing after 20 years the Metropolitan Police Force is being called racist, misogynistic, and now homophobic, it leads the community to feel unsafe and believe that nothing's changed. But we know the majority of officers wake up every day to go out to do a good job and want to keep the community safe. Well, the ones that I've had the privilege of engaging with when we've moved people on witness protection to keep them safe, or the outreach team that we deliver training around London and beyond, are actually good, clean-hearted people that want to do the right thing. But you could only find one person that could cause massive destruction. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly run down memory lane and go back to 2018, where an officer, superintendent, decided that he was above the law. And before an arrest or even a charge came about, he decided that he would apply a safeguarding guidance that came out from the Home Office in 2015. And he started ringing around the whole country because the police had not done their land registry check to see that the previous tenant had moved out. And instead they went in the house, fiddled about, and thought that whatever they found in the house was the previous tenants. They seized stuff went missing, stuff got broken. But more importantly, Metropolitan officers are not gas safety trained, and they touched the gas appliances, which is connected to the national grid, without leaving a letter or saying, oh, this is what we've done. And because of that, it was as if you've done one wrong, you have to keep covering it up. And that went on for, I think, about 19 months. Rebelled 9 times, then went to court, and the judge just threw it out because the judge couldn't believe the nonsense. There was even an incident where the CPS, who's the Crown Prosecution, pressured the professional standards to turn over a statement that had been made complaining about the police's bad behaviour. And let me explain to you who the professional standards are, because they're meant to be one step down from the IOPC. So the IOPC are the people that pick up things like murders and serious things when they happen. They go to the IOPC, they're like the FBI. Before they get to that stage, they go to professional standards, who will then look at the case, investigate it. This case was sent to the IOPC 3 times and rejected 3 times by the professional standards, sent it up to the IOPC because they thought it was so complex and serious. But the IOPC rejected it, sent it back down. The professional standards officer was pressured by the CPS to send in a statement, which is totally illegal and unfounded. And once a complaint went in, the professional standards did make a statement and say, I don't think that this is correct because this will be used against him in court. So at least he covered himself there. So all of that's in writing. Tampering with gas appliances was caught on body cam. So everything was captured on body cam. So there's nothing that could be denied. But the point why I had to go back down memory lane, this was all orchestrated by one senior officer. And this is something that Mark Rowley, Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley, needs to look at, is some officers, whether it's armed police or as we see, where they then outside of work then start abusing their badge or their powers, or within work decide that they're gonna wrongly apply laws onto other people, which is cause lifetime damage. If you ring around the whole country and you're not only targeting that person, you're also damaging their organization and their reputation. So it's not only defamation of character, it's damaging to the organisation. So all the directors and staff and everything's been affected. That's lifetime damage, because some of the contracts have never and will never come back. So it's how do you compensate for that? How do you quantify the amount of damage being done? That's something that Mark Rowley is currently looking into, because it has to be fixed. And sometimes an apology goes a long way. And one of the things we have to look at here is the trauma being caused to the community when we visit the Casey report. At what point does the community start feeling safe again? Because although officers are going to be weeded out and zero tolerance, some going to go to prison, some of them going to be kicked out of the force.
These are the necessities that I've just explained to you.
No necessities. What I keep going.
Well, that's one of three, one of four. So, okay. Well, it'll allow you to get some close.
What is it you're searching for?
Articles relating to the offences
in St Albans
in 2020. This is the allegation that's been made to us. Okay, sir.
There's no necessity.
Yes, there is.
I've only been a police officer for 20 years.
Right, David.
Do you want me to come naked like this?
No, just understand you're under arrest.
I know
Okay.
I'm under
just
arrest.
explain to us what do you need.
I'll pull out like this. Don't
Right.
worry about it.
Can one of my colleagues go and get you stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to? Yeah.
Yep.
Which one's yours?
The back one.
Okay.
Are you in the investigation?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Where are your keys? Then we'll bring those at least.
To identify the patterns of behaviour, and we fully accept responsibility for those failures in process. He used his position as a police officer to exert power and control over his victims, and I believe that prolonged the suffering of those victims, and I'm truly sorry for that.
When does the safety come back in? If we look at Bastard Dave, as they called him, or David Carrick, who served the Metropolitan Police for 20 years. And he carried a firearm, which is one of the most trusted duties there. And there was 9 complaints about him. 9. Why wasn't that same legislation applied to David Carrick, where his employer was rung around and he was then prevented from work and safeguarding was attached? Because it was within the same years that this was going on, between 2018 and upwards. So this same rule should have applied to him, and this is something I want to see the commissioner do, is that the same applications that are attached to people within the public, civilians, officers should know that will also reach them. And then it comes to Wayne Couzens, who sadly killed Sarah Everard. I want to send our love and blessings to Sarah's family and hope that one day they could heal and move forward. Women and girls, men and boys, should feel safe in the community. Everyone should feel safe. And the sad part, when we talk about, if you see something called the police, if it's the police behaving badly, who do you call? And this is why we've now decided to write a report, our own independent report, where we're speaking to officers within the Met who are frightened to speak out. And we're gonna more look at solution focus. We're not here to burn down the bridge, because the bridge needs to be maintained. What we're gonna do is work to get rid of these individuals that don't respect the privilege that they've been given to govern and protect and serve the community with consent. And I'm going to repeat that. Police investigate and serve with consent. It's with consent. Because I think sometimes some people forget that the community has to give consent to be policed. And also for the mayor and the mayor's office, I want them to listen closely to this. They were also copied in over the past 4 years into this case. And they need to learn from this. The community has been traumatized. The community needs healing. We have seen the great work from the outreach team to rebuild that bridge, bring the community back together. We're going to continue doing that. We have to commend officers that have gone above and beyond to make sure that the community's voice are heard. We have to commend them. And we also have to commend other people within government that have spoken out against this bad behaviour. And we have to also commend Baroness Casey for being so brave and coming out and speaking about this, because writing a report is one thing and then disappearing into the wilderness. But it's another thing when you stand against your word and make sure that what you've said meets what you're doing. And I'll give you an example of good practice. Jeff Booth. Jeff Booth is a senior police officer that is loved by thousands within the community, because Jeff will go out and be one with his community. We need more officers like that, that are approachable and are ready to, let's put the past behind us and move forward. That is the only way that we're going to get change. We need to stop pretending there's no money there and look at the POCA Fund, Proceeds of Crimes Act. Reinvest that money back into the community and grassroots organizations and allow them to do for self. Allow the community to work and empower other community members to start bringing the change within the community. And at the same time, the commissioner could then be left alone to get on with cleaning house. And once those bad characters are gone, the new ones will come in and they will learn from the officers within the Metropolitan Force that are actually there to do a good job. Nothing before its time. And the right person needed to be in post when this review came out. Because if we had the wrong commissioner, we will get the wrong results. I believe this commissioner means what he says. I also believe that the senior leadership underneath him, because we also have to remember the structure of the Metropolitan Police Force. The commissioner is just the front man. It's like you've got a striker on a football team, you've got people in midfield, and you've got the defence, and then you've got the goalkeeper. Unless the whole team supports the commissioner, we'll be back here in another 20 years talking the same story. Having another review where the taxpayers have spent thousands to hear the same thing 20 years on. Let's make this a landmark change within our country. We've got enough to worry about with living crisis, much less worrying about our protectors. And for those of you out there within the force that know you've got a few friends that are a bit edgy, or you're probably scared of them, there should be an anonymous box within every police station where if somebody wants to whistleblow their mate or work colleague, it should be done anonymously. And that box should be taken seriously, because only then we will see the embarrassment that's been caused come to a stop. It's time for change. Let's make the change happen now. The booklet that I've got here is a very, very important one. I went to an event and I saw it there and I decided to take it. I never knew when it will come in handy. It's called The Vetting Process to Becoming a Police Officer. What is vetting? Why do we carry out the vetting? Family and associates, financial criteria. Who requires a police vetting? What does vetting entail? How are the vetting decisions made? Previous convictions and cautions, very, very important there. Because as we've seen, a few people have slipped through the net and become police officers. So this is a very important document, and you could also download this online, find out the vetting process. So no longer should there be any excuse for officers slipping through the net, because we've got the vetting process. Just like if you go for a job, you've got the DBS enhanced. Every officer should get regular DBS checks. And also drugs test as well. I think random drugs tests for officers, because we can't have people policing us that might be on drugs. I'm talking Class A cannabis. You can't then arrest someone for cannabis if you're also smoking cannabis. You can't arrest someone for doing Class A drugs if you're recreationally doing Class A drugs. So I think random drugs test for every single officer within the Metropolitan Force going forward. And any serious complaint or bad behavior, they need to go through the vetting again. It's like, let's brush up on your skills, because we don't even know how you got in there in the first place, because that behavior don't mirror us. That's the kind of language we need to be talking, from senior officers all the way down. Let's change the culture and move forward.
This man abused women in the most disgusting manner. It is sickening. We've let women and girls down, and indeed we've let Londoners down. The women who suffered and survived this violence have been unimaginably brave and courageous in coming forward. And I do understand also that this will lead to some women across London questioning whether they can trust the Met to keep them safe.
Ace says she was assaulted by a stranger on her way home, an event that left her traumatised and feeling the Metropolitan Police did not take her seriously.
I felt belittled and dismissed over the phone. I didn't feel that it was taken seriously, the fact that I wasn't assured that this might not happen to someone else, that the Met couldn't dispatch somebody to patrol the area, just made me have really little faith in how much they value women's safety or public safety.